So I've got a limited amount of time and about 80 some odd slides to go through. I'm going to speed run you as best as I can through a bit of a design education. And just as a quick question, as a primer, how many of you work in the design field or work very closely with designers? All right, we've got a handful in here. That's great, so I'm not alone. So yes, I'm Alex Wykoff. That's my grimacing face. I have a background in comp sci, as well as a certificate in interaction design and social entrepreneurship. I created a distributed camp. I worked at Brave. I worked at Steakfish. I now work at Airfoil. I'm head of Airfoil Labs, where I've helped to ship multiple dApps, and I've helped us to be the first design agency to run validators. As far as I know, we're the only design agency that's ever run validators, and obviously not a part of the visual or brand design team. That is to say, I understand design, but I love the technology. I'm here to talk to you about the idea that there is a process for having innovation occur with whatever your project is. And one of the processes that I wish to put in front of you to help you to familiarize with this is the double diamond. There's multiple different ways of articulating this, and basically it is a way of breaking down the problem space first before you dive into the solution space. And this is probably my favorite articulation of it, because at the tail end here we have a little bit of a loop in terms of trying to hone in on what is that thing between you figured out what the problem is and you start to articulate what solutions are, and you have to iterate your way towards really polishing it. But there's also the Stanford B-School process, the IBM loop. There are many, many different design processes, but for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to focus on the double diamond. If you've never heard about design before, if you've never really dug in on it, this is kind of as close to a dictionary definition as I can give you. What I really want to hone in on here is that this is an intentional practice aimed at diving in on problems and articulating possible solutions, but it really is not just like make it pretty. There's a whole lot of us, I think, we understand design through some other lens, whether it's architecture or visual arts or something like this, because that's what's more tangible in front of us. But I wish to impress upon you that design is actually a deeply intellectual field that has so much rigor behind it, and I'm here to introduce you to that rigor if you've not seen it yet. So, zooming in, we're going to break this down into its component pieces. So, there's research, sense-making, ideation, and prototyping. Research is one of the most maligned aspects of all this. There's probably two major organizations in the world that I think do research really, really well. One of them is IDEO, and the other is Frog. But you don't tend to see their research, you tend to see the results of their research. Like Apple, when they made their devices, there was like a design language for all of their physical devices at first. It was called Snow White. And you don't know that, but you know what the Macintosh SE30 looks like. We skip over research a lot in works, and it's too costly, it takes too long, it's complex and arcane, the reports are unclear, it's squishy, it's not quantitative. And this is something I really want to hammer in on here too, that a lot of our engineering-driven orgs, and Umji, I really appreciate that you want to bring more engineers into the space, but so many of them are hung up on quantitative bias. They really are fixated on the things that they can count, feeling like if you can measure it, you can control it. But I wish to also impress upon you, if you can feel it and experience it, that matters too. But the other thing I wish to say about research is, when you put effort into research and using this as a way of driving insights and innovation in your work, this runs contrary to much of the narratives that we see on Silicon Valley in terms of like move fast and break things and just ship it already. I'm here to tell you that research is necessary to manufacture insights, that you can manufacture insights, and that is the basis of innovation. So if you're trying to open a new field, if you're trying to reach a new audience, this is a method. That is a straightforward method to get there. Inside of research, it's complex. We have so much going on. So you can do interviews, contextual inquiry, cultural probes, user focus groups, and then all the other secondary research methods. So this is where it gets fun. Here's where AI is involved, okay? I want to tell you that like all of those reasons before whereby we're not doing research are about to become crashing down in terms of like those barriers. There are much more lower barriers now and much more affordable ways to get through all this. So in terms of interviews, transcribing interviews used to be the most annoying thing on planet Earth, and now you get it free and out of the box. You can go to Otter AI, this is Fireflies, there's so many others. You can jump around to different points in the conversation, and you get a bunch of different sentiment filters and summaries and whatnot. It's brilliant. And so these kind of systems exist today. The original version of this talk was actually made in March at Camp BUIDL. And so this is the updated version, almost 9 months later. But yes, also you can use AI agents now to reach out to users and prompt them with questions and get the responses from the users. So where you used to be quite limited and maybe you could only do a handful of interviews and it was really time consuming and hard to be able to record those reactions and whatnot and gather that data in the first place, now it can take like effectively 0 minutes of your time other than the framing questions that you wish to generate. And this is not a new idea. So how many of you have heard of ELIZA?
Oh, yeah.
Great. So we have some AI fans in the house. Like, this has been around for a really dang long time. The idea of conversing with AI is nothing new. It's just now we have a mechanism for doing it and capturing that output and then making sense out of it, right? Whereas this time, if you wish to do it back in the original days of ELIZA, you'd have to use like a dot matrix printer. That's why nobody did it. Also, you can have virtual avatars. So this is like a really mind-blowing thing to me, is that you don't necessarily need to have an individual human asking the questions, but you can still elicit a little bit more of a human-like response out of people that they can have a face to talk to, and you can have a feeling that they're talking to somebody real as they're expressing their problems and wants and desires. Of course, this gets a little bit weird when you have an AI agent turn on another AI agent. You can end up in some pretty weird territory. So it's very important that if you're using an AI agent to ask questions about the outside world, that they're actually asking questions of a human, not another agent. So that hits up interviews. Talking about contextual inquiry. If you've never seen contextual inquiry before, this is amazing stuff. This is what ethnographers and anthropologists tend to use. You're getting into the space of where people actually do the work. And you see how do they interact with their colleagues or their friends and family, or what are the other tools in their ecosystem, what are the distractions and like physical pain points. Some people sit on like rickety ass chairs and get like a really sore butt, so they can't have focus for 1 to 2 hours while they're using your product. They have to get up and stretch their legs. It's too painful otherwise, right? There's all these factors, real human factors, to when people are using technology and how they're using it and the broader context in which they're using it. Contextual inquiry is amazing. It's also like insanely expensive to pull off in terms of human time, because you have to show up at somebody's place and they have to let you in, and then you have to have like cameras and stuff, and you're trying to be subtle about it, but it's hard for people to act natural when they know that somebody's recording everything, right? It's like if you had a film crew show up to your house, how natural are you going to be, right? But with contextual inquiry, we now have all forms of cameras that you could have it inside of like the Ray-Bans, or if you're having Apple Vision in this case, it's scanning around the room and identifying objects. And this is like out of the box. This is what Apple Vision does for you. I don't know, in the news recently, maybe you all saw a very similar version of this as well, which was a little bit terrifying, which is the drone footage. There was like drones flying over people's homes and identifying everything in the neighborhood. But yes, this is, February of last year. That's when, hopefully I can show you the date. Fudge. Well, anyways, that post is from February of last year. So this is nothing new. Vision OS is something that has existed, and now we have like a little bit more of a direct means to capture all of this that doesn't have to be quite as invasive if your end user is perhaps wearing the device, and then they're basically showing you what their life is like. Talking about showing what your life is like, cultural probes are a really old idea in terms of user research. When you can't get to where you want to go, but you need to learn about that other community of folks, what we used to do, and what we still do to a certain extent, is put a bunch of objects into effectively a shoebox and mail it over there. And you might mail over like a disposable camera and a notebook and a bunch of other things. When I was doing this kind of research using cultural probes, there was a whole community of folks that like I couldn't hang out in their house on a regular basis to like get how they're feeling throughout the day. And so I gave them notebooks, and I had them set some alarms on their phone, and when the alarm went off, they would pop open the notebook, write some notes, and then at the end of like a couple of weeks, I would get the notebook back, and I'd get this slice of life about like what their daily lives was like. It was really awesome. Well, guess what? How many of you have seen BUIDL? There we go, we got some hands. Have many of you all used it? Yeah? Okay. I'd be really curious to follow up with you later as to like, did it really vibe with you? Yeah, I guess you like it? Okay, cool. But yeah, I think that things like BUIDL are a new cultural probe tool that it just was an unintentional consequence, but like you get to see into people's real life at like regular intervals, and that's pretty fascinating. And then user focus groups. Okay, so user focus groups are a way of getting kind of a group sentiment and a shared dialogue around a particular experience. In this case, we see that it's facilitated by somebody who's on the other side of a long-distance call, right? Well, once again, that doesn't need to be a real person anymore. Thank you, AI. Now, secondary research. Secondary research is like when you can't do any of those prior things I was talking to you about, you can go and look at like what's been written already, what's been put into media already. And so we have papers, reports, and published works. Trying to read through all of them and summarize them is hella time consuming. Thank you, ChatGPT. You've now made that instant. Documentaries. If the documentary hasn't been transcribed already, kick it into Fireflies or Otter AI and it'll transcribe it for you, and again you get a summary. And then social media. Now this is my holy shit moment. So like, I was thinking about this and I was like, yeah, of course, you can like scan social media and there's a history of social media, go to the Internet Archives, and you can get this like kind of history of a dialogue around a particular cultural event. But now, Truth Terminal is the cultural event. Like, it's asking people, what do you want? And what do you want to have out in the world? And then it's turning around and generating it. And sometimes it's like stupid shit like a goat token. But sometimes it's also really interesting. And so Truth Terminal is actually doing this thing kind of in live action. You can watch it where it's taking in responses from the outside world and then it's generating objects and saying like, hey, is this kind of like addressing the thing you were talking about? It's really amazing. And it's not going to be a far long way between this and the end of my thesis here. So okay, that's just the zooming in on research. I've got about 7 minutes left and I'm going to really fly through sense making. Okay, so what the fuck is sense making? It is the actual process of making meaning. Making meaning. So we have all this random, qualitative, fuzzy data. How do we turn it into something meaningful? You have to use logic. And in this case, we're going to talk about abductive reasoning, which is a movement away from the center. You are taking things that you have seen and experienced, you are taking the stuff that you've just read about, and now you're going to make a leap forward and try and figure out where to go next. There are many ways to do it, and in particular, I'm going to talk about affinity diagramming. But then there's, of course, experience frameworking. I'm not going to talk about any of that. And then lastly, gaming empathy. So affinity diagramming, all that this really is you have a bunch of snippets. In this case, these are people talking about sandwiches. And then you summarize them, right? And you're trying to find the points in common. So in this case, these people are talking about things you put on sandwich. In this case, these people are talking about sandwich folklore. There's just basically a summarization of what are the threads in common. You have like responses from 15, 20, 50 different people. What are the threads in common? What are we finding between all these people that's common? You then have to ask why are you noticing these points in common? So this is like a different set of examples. And then you make an answer. These insights that you generate are supposed to be provocative statements of truth. They are supposed to kind of rustle some jimmies and make people feel upset. And they are supposed to provoke a thought. So, I saw this, I know this, insight. Okay? This is the process in which you manufacture insights. So, they are framed as universal truths. They're allowed to be wrong. Okay? They are meant to provoke feelings and responses. And that is it. Quantitative data is meant for a model that you can predict. Qualitative data is meant to generate insights that are provocations for future action. So, in terms of sense making, what do we got from the AI world? Actually, not much. So other than k-means clustering, which is this, there's actually little to no tooling in this space. I think it's maybe a good case for RAGs. If you don't know what RAGs are, those are generated AIs that generate things, but they're based on retrieval. So they have to like go out and get some kind of information to help inform the thing they're going to generate. And then we see in a couple of cases, these are very modern posts. So December of 24 and January of this year, those are two modern white papers that are just on trying to use AI for the purposes of sense making. This, I think, is a gap, and I would really love to see more AI researchers dive in on this. Okay, so ideation. What do we get from AI? A vignette is this idea of like a 3-panel comic or so to help like describe a problem and a particular solution. And this is kind of what Midjourney will give you right now, or at least in February of last year. This is what Grok gives you as of like 2 nights ago. And so we have a long ways to go in terms of ideation. I don't think that like vignettes are going to be a thing that generative systems are going to make for a while unless you get really, really hella descriptive about the actual individual panels. So this is, I think, a point of development for AI. So we're not there yet. Oh, wireframing? Holy crap. So this was February of last year, where WireGen can help you to make a whole bunch of quick wireframes. You can just describe what you wish to have happen, and it'll put it together for you. And you can also get high fidelity mockups as well, and those are things that are much more robust. So in February of last year, if you look at like what it gives you, it looks kind of skimpy. It's kind of looking for some inspiration. It'll draw you a few boxes, and then as of a couple nights ago, not only does it do all that, but it literally writes the code for you, which is crazy. And that is just like one app. That's Magic Patterns. They've gone a huge way in the course of last year. And then also in terms of prototyping, you have UIZard, which is kind of amazing. And then you can actually tell it how you want things to change, and it'll try to make a change based on that. So that's ideation and prototyping for you. Where is design going? This is the last 2 minutes, and this is going to be awesome. Okay, so back to this, right? Design, as it currently stands, is for other people, not with other people in a lot of cases. It's a singular vision applied to a diverse mass, it's subjective, and it's inherently anti-sovereign. That is, you're taking the will and view of a singular designer or a small group of designers and then forcing it on a bunch of people. What I see as next is we are going to be able to work with our agents to explain the world that we want. We are going to be able to tell it how we want it to change over time, and we are going to be able to build it our nomadic selves. That leads us to full fidelity, personal fluid interfaces. So, not only are these interfaces much more malleable, but they fundamentally change how do we consider development, content creation, and design as a whole. Guess what? Iliad said the same thing yesterday. Freaking amazing. I said this back in February, he said it yesterday. It's great. Apps will continue to not only look at the time on task, but they'll very importantly have to look at the satisfaction of the end user. It matters. And they'll make adjustments to our interfaces. The way that I think about things are different than the way that you think about things, when you think about things, when you think about things. We will all have bespoke interfaces. Iliad said it yesterday. It's awesome. So, I think it's really great to see somebody from a design perspective say this, and then to see somebody from quite a technical perspective say this, and we both have kind of converged in the same space. So the way I see it is design will be done for other people, but also for ourselves. I think it's going to be a flexible vision aimed at solving problems. It is still a subjective application of taste, but it will be inherently and deeply self-sovereign. This is the impact of AI on design. So the requirements for this, and they're down to like the last 10 seconds. We need to have self-observing systems, RAGs or agents, you tell me. The ability to generate interfaces locally, multiple sources of high fidelity, truthful information, which means decentralized cryptography, signed data, and attestations from sources. So that is it. Hopefully you were entertained. My name is Alex Wykoff.